Most Americans seem to view the seemingly unavoidable rematch between President Biden and Donald Trump with a sense of impending doom. The president's age is a major concern. He's now using shorter steps to board Air Force One after a string of embarrassing stumbles. Democrats hope that his political success will spur him to re-election, and we'll debate that in a moment. It's a relentless volley of verbal blunders that look increasingly likely to define the 80-year-old president's legacy.
All right. God save the Queen, man. Vladimir and I shouldn't be so familiar. Mr. Zelensky and I. Well, Mr. President.
Has Vladimir Putin been weakened by recent events?
It's hard to tell, but he's clearly losing the war in Iraq.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Vladimir.
And Aqua and his whole shrine.
Yes.
It doesn't make edifying viewing, really. Joining me now is best-selling author of new book, The Biden Malaise, Kimberly Strassel, and the Fox News host, Jessica Tarlov. Well, welcome to both of you. All right, Kimberly, you've written a book about the Biden Malaise. Many people feel that Joe Biden is looking like a man really feeling his age now, and that is beginning to be an embarrassment for him, for the US, on the world stage, and for the Democrats. What do they do about this?
Well, I think what's remarkable is just how rapid that change has been, Piers. I mean, things were a little shaky even as he campaigned, but 3 years on, no one can avoid it anymore. I'm very much struck by the number of times now the media feels that they can talk about it. It's such a central subject, whereas not so long ago it was taboo. And I think it's really up to Democrats to deal with this. The president seems intent on running, even though many in his party, at least quietly, have a lot of concerns about that. And what's remarkable to me is that you aren't having a repeat of the Carter years where somebody other than Robert Kennedy stands up and challenges the presidency, because I think they'd have a far better shot of winning that primary against Biden than what happened against Carter back in the 70s.
All right, Jessica Tarlov, do you feel comfortable, if you're completely honest, that Joe Biden was still, 18 months away from the next election?
Yeah.
And if he was to win another 4 years, so that would be nearly 6 years more. When you look at him now, do you see somebody physically and mentally competent enough to do a 6-year stretch as president? The most difficult job in the world, arguably.
Not arguably, I think pretty indisputably. Yes, I see someone who can do it, but I do see someone, as Kimberly said, who has slowed down from even when he was campaigning in 2015. He was thinking about running then, in 2020. And that's something that Democrats are definitely taking note of. There have been a lot of whisper campaigns. You see it all over the pages of the New York Times, people that clearly are not ready to attach their names to it, but are concerned about the future of this. But I do understand why he's running again. He has a huge record to be proud of and to be able to talk to the American people about. And you're seeing that actually reflected now. There's a new Monmouth poll out today where Biden is beating Trump in the hypothetical matchup that looks like it will become reality by 7 points. It feels like the tide is shifting a little bit in terms of how people feel about the economy. I think a lot of that is due to the success of Bidenomics, as he calls it. So yes, would I rather it was the 55-year-old version of Joe Biden? Sure. But this is what we have now, and what he has been able to accomplish, I think, is what's really overriding concerns about that for the Democrats.
I mean, what's interesting, I think, Kimberly, is that the Republicans have their own problem, which is that Trump has now been indicted twice. We have a third set of indictments coming, we believe, imminently. There may be indeed a fourth set coming after that. Completely unprecedented territory. And there's a belief, I think, in Washington that Trump may well barrel his way through all this to be the Republican nominee, but hasn't got a chance of winning a general election, certainly not with independents who've been completely put off by this barrage of criminal indictments. So the Republicans have their own issues here. If it was Donald Trump, Joe Biden might think, you know what, I may not be the man I was, as Jessica rightly said, but I can still beat Donald Trump, but he may be right.
Well, I think he may be right, too. I mean, this is one of the main arguments against Donald Trump, is that he has not won in recent elections, and we can see that record of it. I think the problem that the Republicans have at the moment is that this is turning into a repeat of 2016. When you go look at Donald Trump and his poll numbers, I don't know how accurate those are, they seem to match pretty much about what he had in the 2016 primary at 35%, maybe 40% support among certain Republican primary voters. That means that the majority of the Republican Party doesn't want him to be the nominee. And yet there are so many competitors in the field that they are dividing the vote. So there's going to have to be a fish or cut bait moment for the rest of these candidates as they get closer to those Iowa caucuses. If they are not polling beyond the low single digits, they get out and allow somebody who's got a better chance to consolidate some support.
Right. I mean, Jessica, Joe Biden's public approval rating is about 41%, close to the lowest level of his presidency. 54% disapprove of him as president and his performance. His rating's almost identical to where Trump's was at the same point in his presidency. Obama's, by contrast, was 46% at this stage in his first term. So he's got a lot of work to do here. And the problem I see is that every time he has one of these gaffes or stumbles, verbal or physical, it gets put on recycle in the 24 hours news cycle. Boom, 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 boom. We just run a whole sort of highlights reel just now and flashes around. And that becomes the constant stick to beat him with. Is he able to communicate the message of the record that he has in the context of all this other stuff, which is clearly, from the optics, really bad for him?
Yeah, obviously, it's hard to go into an election if people, what they're seeing is you tripping over sandbags, which that was the advanced person's fault. That shouldn't have been there. But it's not good for anyone. In terms of the approval rating, yes, he's below Obama, but Obama did have points that were much lower than that. It didn't happen right when he was heading into the 2012 re-election cycle. But all of these presidents do have their moments. And when Trump was at approval ratings around there or below, he also had the fact that he was so polarizing. And that's the thing about Joe Biden. He just isn't as polarizing as a Donald Trump or even as some other Democrats. People know Joe Biden. They're familiar with him over decades of service. And he just doesn't turn moderate voters off and independents off in the same way that a further left Democrat might. And to Kimberly's point about what's going on in the Republican side of all of this, I thought initially when DeSantis was getting in that he was going to be the person that everyone could coalesce around as the alternative to Trump. I feel that he has not run a great campaign so far, that he has been disappointing in a lot of ways, shown that he's not ready for the proverbial prime time of this moment. And there's a lot of time to go. But you can't look to the Republican side now and say, that's the guy or that's the gal that they should be banding together that'll stand up the best against Joe Biden. And that makes it the Trump-Biden rematch that we all expected. And Biden is still the guy who doesn't turn people off as much as the other guy.
Yeah, I do think that's a really valid point, that even a sort of 2/3 strength Biden could still defeat Trump because Trump is so divisive and has all these criminal indictments swirling around him, which cannot be good. I mean, it can be good to win a Republican nomination, but it can't be good to win a general election. I just don't think most Americans who sit in the middle are going to be anything other than put off by that. Don't you think, Kimberly?
Well, yes, I think that that's a very valid point. I'm also really struck by the degree that Democrats continue to bank on Joe Biden's win on the basis of a rematch with Donald Trump. I would like to consider what this race would actually look like. By contrast, if you suddenly had a very dynamic 50-year-old Republican nominee that was not Donald Trump, who had a record, for instance, like DeSantis does down in Florida. I mean, if you dig in to Joe Biden's poll numbers, really dig in, you might think Americans tend to look back at the 1970s and think, oh, the terrible, bad 70s, the Jimmy Carter presidency. Joe Biden, when it comes to the handling of the economy, doesn't even poll as well as Jimmy Carter. And those are the issues that people go to vote on. So right now, the party is again, banking that they're going to get someone that's even less popular than Joe Biden. They sure better hope that turns out, because they've got a really big problem otherwise.
Well, you know what I would do if I were the Democrats, and I'm not the Democrats. I can't even vote in your glorious election. But if I was, I would be working out a way to get someone like Gavin Newsom to be the nominee, come what may. And actually, I think I could actually imagine a scenario here where in the end you end up with Newsom via DeSantis or Youngkin, actually. I mean, I might be losing my marbles, but I do think that in the end may be what happens, and we don't end up with the rematch everyone doesn't want to have. Jessica, final word to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if Joe Biden chooses of his own volition not to run, that you're absolutely going to see Gavin Newsom. I think Gretchen Whitmer as well. Her super PAC is raising money like wildfire. She's fantastic. The party's really excited about her. Obviously, Kamala Harris will be part of a primary, though I doubt, frankly, that she would end up winning it. And the contrast, yes, if you have 81-year, he'll be 81, Joe Biden when we start the debates, and 45-year-old DeSantis, for instance, or Tim Scott or Nikki Haley, that is going to be very stark for people. But it's not as easy as many Republicans think for the Republican Party writ large, whoever is the representative, to get away from some of their extreme positions. Ron DeSantis signed a 6-week heartbeat bill in Florida. When the majority of Americans are firmly against that. Those are things that are going to haunt him.
I think, if you chase down that road to get the nomination for the party, it's fine. But to win a general election on the back of that,
you got to come back.
That can be very difficult. Listen, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Expert analysis, much appreciated.
Thank you.
Your debuts on Piers Morgan Uncensored. I hope not the last time I see you both. Thank you very much.
No. Congratulations on the book, Kimberly.
Bye-bye.
Yes, Kimberly, the book is called The Biden Malaise, How America Bounces Back from Joe Biden's Dismal Repeat of the Jimmy Carter Years. I have to say, I've interviewed Jimmy Carter a few times. I think he's one of the all-time great Americans. So the good news for Joe Biden may be, if he does become the new Jimmy Carter, that in 50 years' time, everyone will remember him with great reverence. Thank you both very much indeed.